Are we on? Are we online? Yes, we are, I think. So, everybody, welcome to the conference. Welcome here and online. If you can't hear properly online, write us on chat. Also, hello to everybody who's watching this as a recording later, asynchronously. It's a great pleasure to start this conference for the first time. And well, for the official opening and official hello, I invite Ramunė, Balevičiūtė, Vice-Rector for Science and Art of the Lithuanian Academy of Music and Theatre, to say hi and start.
Thank you very much, Mantautas. It will not be the official speech, but I'm looking at this funny covering. It looks like the scene of the puppet theater house. Yeah, I'm very, very happy having a chance to greet all of you and to welcome the Lithuanian Academy of Music and Theatre. Actually, it has taken about 3 years for us to organize this event, so the topic is really mature. And I would like this conference to be not the official one, because all scholars and practitioners that participate in this event are really passionate researchers in this field. So the main aim is not just to officially present the outcomes of our research, but we would love to have like a stepping platform for further collaborations and possible future collaborations and research, and to discuss in depth the topic of creativity and improvisation, just to exchange our ideas and insights and to discuss and discuss endlessly these things. So please feel free and support your colleagues and ask questions, and let's keep this intellectual energy and have a great time here.
Thank you, Ramunė. I will just, I'll just add maybe like a little story. You know, all life is stories and research is stories when you think about it. So all of it started when we have been in Antwerp, right? Like 3 years ago, and we met some colleagues from Porto and Bruno and Rui later. And then we were just having a dinner and talking about improvisation, and then we thought like, okay, we have researching it in different fields, in different ways, through arts, through artistic research, through scientific research, and so on. And usually we do everything in our own, like a backyard of our own kind of discipline or our own method. It would be nice actually to see what would happen if we would try to connect different backyards together. And well, okay, maybe let's do a conference or a seminar. And actually we also had like a little thing last year, which was like a online blended conference where Paul and Kiki and some other colleagues have been there online. And then we finally got some financing and decided to do this conference. So we had like 3 years leading up to this. However, it's not the end, it's just the start, because we're thinking that it would be nice to keep on this informal community of people and maybe keep it growing and keep on talking about creativity and improvisation in different disciplines, as well as in kind of different interdisciplinary contexts, also connecting to sciences and other fields than the arts. And that's the main idea. So the networking, meeting, talking, as well as thinking what could be done further together is also a very important thing. So it's like a historical starting point of this. So let's stop with the introductions. I think we are a bit faster, but that's good. You know, we can improvise with time a little bit. So maybe we can invite Paul to start with the first keynote and start the conference. Welcome.
Thank you, Ramunė, for the invitation, Mantautas for your support, and all the colleagues helping organize this and making our stay really beautiful, particularly this beautiful weather you've organized. Extraordinary improvisation, natural improvisation. So I'm Allain from the University of Kent in Canterbury. It's my third time here, I think. Maybe I've been another time, but my third time here at the Academy, and really excited to be beginning of this project. I really admire anyone who's actually managed to get some funding related to the subject of improvisation, because in my experience, the nature of improvisation makes it very hard to write what you're going to achieve. You know, there's something intrinsic to what we're looking at today, that when you have to describe your outputs, what your outcomes are going to be, that's difficult. It's much easier to talk about your processes. But I think one of the other lovely things, and the great achievement, is bringing people together from different disciplines. My discipline is theatre and performance, and I'm going to be talking about a neighbour, Jerzy Grotowski, the Polish theatre director. And those of you who know me, if anyone here does, I know some of you know me very well, won't be surprised that I'm going to talk about Grotowski. But I think I should just justify that choice in that he's known for his contribution to world theatre, and I realise that there are many musicians in the room and people from other disciplines. Well, hopefully it is a name that you might at least know a bit about. I'm not going to tell you a lot about him, but what I am going to focus on is what he's also known for, which is his disregard and very critical language about improvisation. So I want to explore that a bit first, before I then will take you to some films about my own practice to give you some insights into where improvisation sits within my own practice, which is predominantly about actor training. And what Grotowski has said, as you'll see in my title, leads also to my apology, my first apology, for his language. I don't like normally to include a word like shit in the title of an academic paper, but the choice was given to me by Grotowski, and I thought, actually, I have to respect this. So apologies if anyone is offended by that. My second apology is that I'm doing that terrible thing that I'm not here for the whole duration of the conference. I have to leave tomorrow afternoon. So I hope I'll have an opportunity to hear some of you later and tomorrow morning, and also to meet you. I see we've got a networking session later, so I apologize in advance for leaving early, but as Ramunė and Mantautas have said, this is just the beginning. So if I can't stay longer now, next time I will see you all. So I will also be struggling with technology, but hopefully in the hands of Mantautas I can manage to make a PC work as a Mac user. And this is the nature of improvisation that we're all familiar with. So, there we go. So you can see what I was referring to with this terrible word. And it's unusual in Grotowski. Grotowski was very precise about his language. He didn't speak very good English. He spoke French much better. He was Polish, of course. But in translations of his work into English, he was an absolute pedant, very precise. So this word, shit, is chosen purposefully, although it's interesting in the other version of the article this comes from. This is in a book, the Grotowski source book, but in the article he's changed it, he's lessened it. So somehow some modesty has crept in. Hi, do come in. So I'm going to be talking about this figure of Grotowski, as I say, a Polish theatre director, and really thinking about the implications of his work for improvisation. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is this now problematic word, mastery. Of course, mastery denotes patriarchal language. It denotes a kind of long-established tradition of dominance, of hierarchies, of authority. And it's difficult to talk about those things these days. But I'm very aware, as I am in an academy where music is practiced as much as theatre, and I think music has probably a much more honest and stronger relationship to mastery than theatre does. But certainly it's a word that has to be equally treated with some caution, just like the word shit. Okay, so Grotowski's antipathy towards improvisation is something that evolved later. Certainly in his classic book, which I assume is translated into Lithuanian. Yeah, thank you, Ramunė. Been translated into many languages of the world. And English translation, which was curated by Eugenio Barber, the Danish, Italian-born Danish theatre director. It's a collection of writings, and some of those are by Grotowski, but some by other figures. And it describes really his practice during this vital period of his work, the theatre of productions from 1960 to 1969. So this came at the end. I'm not going to read out the quote unless it would be helpful for anyone. I think people online, you can read it as well. Can everyone see it okay? But I just want to pick out some things. This idea of a score, again, mindful of where we are in this Academy of Music and Theatre. This word that he lifted perhaps from music, partitura, the word in Polish, which perhaps, I don't know what word you use in Lithuanian for score. Is the same word, partitura? Yeah. It's not a word that's familiar at all in English language circles, so we use score. But for Grotowski, this analogy of a musical score was absolutely fundamental to his practice. So he is saying in performance, you really need to be absolutely strict. You shouldn't deviate, you shouldn't be spontaneous, but in an exercise you might be. So he's very worried about this slip into chaos, and his performances were absolutely precisely defined moment by moment in this very precise score of actions. But some of the metaphors that the actors who work with him have used, this idea of a flame, the score is a flame, and then the feelings that you bring to this, the difference, the variation was in the movement of this flame, or the score is the banks of a river, and the actors' feelings, the actors' emotions, the change is in the water that flows between these two banks. So even when there is a very precise score, of course, there is possibility of some change, of some spontaneity, of some feeling, some improvisation, let's say, within very strict confines. But the strict confines are what is really, really important for Grotowski in this phase of his work. So this element of detail, absolute precision, and yes, in an exercise you might find spontaneity, but you also have to first somehow master it, coming back to that idea of mastery. And the distinction there he makes between a performance and an exercise. So he spent a lot of time during that period training his actors, sometimes for hours on end, daily, detailed, rather as a musician would practice their instrument, a very similar process of work. And then this idea of authentic improvisation coming from the detailed work on exercises. But you can see how he, again, gets nervous about moving away too much from these details, from this score. The problem of hysteria that he alludes to, that the actor's response to emotion, the problem of emotion for Grotowski. Later he came to Stanislavski's idea of physical actions, is the kind of hysteria. And we must remember this is the 60s. In Poland, the 60s happened in the 70s in Poland, much later than they did in the US and England, for example, and Paris. But nevertheless, even in the 60s, there was this kind of desire for exploration. And this idea of wild gestures, screams, I think this is one of the problems people identify with Grotowski when they look at it in relation to Antonin Artaud's ideas. People say, oh, he was deeply influenced by Artaud. He put these screams and this kind of hysteria into practice. Grotowski himself said actually he discovered his practice before he discovered Artaud. So he wasn't following a kind of Artaudian impulse. It was later that he came to Artaud. But he said about Antonin Artaud that Artaud had no kind of structure. It was structureless. It was no practice. It was an idea, a concept. But even though Artaud, of course, was an actor himself, he hadn't got a method or a formula for practice in the way that Grotowski was starting to develop. So he's worried about this narcissistic impulse, this desire to entertain on stage, to reveal yourself without restraint, without a strict score. So this was what Grotowski at this time was wrestling with. But those of you who know the history of Grotowski's theatre will understand that after this 9 years of exploration, of acting, taking it to the extreme, taking it to the limit, this pushing this idea of the score very, very far, he decided to leave the theatre. Many people felt he betrayed theatre, that he abandoned them, but for Grotowski, he had taken the actor-audience relation to its limit. So he began this thing called para-theatre, beyond theatre. And the fundamental idea of this was that everyone has the potential to be creative. Everyone has creativity within them. Why are we reading other people's books? Why are we watching people on stage? Why are we watching films that other people are making when we have that innate creativity? He called it also active culture. And he initially used people who he'd been training for the last years, who'd been in his productions that had been celebrated around the world, but then he invited another wider group of people. You can't see it on the screen because I'm in the way, but within that photo is Grotowski, Ryszard Cieślak, his celebrated actor. See if Mantas can move me. And Włodzimierz Staniewski, who's the director of Gardzielica, which is a company that I worked with in Poland from 1989 to 1993. So Staniewski was invited in from student avant-garde theatre to come and work with Grotowski in this paratheatrical period. So initially, the explorations of active culture, which happened in this rural site outside Wrocław, was for a small cohort of highly trained professional actors. But then they opened it up, and as he says, things happened, amazing things happened. But as more and more people came in, more and more participants were invited. The program was advertised on the radio, in newspapers, and people could invite themselves to attend auditions, and they were selected to participate. What happened then was this lovely language of the emotive soup, going back to the hysteria that he was worried his actors would head towards in the 1960s. So later on, he revised his view of the paratheatrical period, and Ludwig Flaschen, who was the dramaturg, the literary manager, who first invited Grotowski to set up the company in Opole, the Theatre of 13 Rows that became the Laboratory Theatre, he described in a book that I edited how paratheatre ended when Staniewski had a bust-up with Grotowski in Venice when they were leading paratheatrical work in islands outside Venice, and Staniewski used similar language to the title of my talk with Grotowski and told him that paratheatre was shit. So Grotowski left and went into the next phase of his work, and later really questioned the value of it. Now, some of you might know this film. It's a cult film. Do you want to just put your hands up if you do know it? Anyone? My Dinner with Andre? Great. Okay. So there's film recommendation. The whole film is on YouTube. I'm going to show you a short extract. So it's an extraordinary film by the well-known director Louis Malle, 1981. And basically, it's a conversation. It's a conversation between Wallace Shawn, who's a well-known writer. One of his well-known monologues is Fever, a fantastic play for a solo actor, discussing, amongst other things, with the famous theatre director André Gregory's time with Grotowski during the paratheatrical work. So I'm just going to play you a short extract of this. Basically, it's just two men talking over dinner about their experience. You can't get more simple than that. But just as those of you who might know his Vanya on 42nd Street, Louis Malle's film, which is another beautiful film about theatre and art, which starts with some actors on stage talking, and then you realize suddenly they've gone into the play Vanya without you realizing how they've moved from life into theatre in an absolutely seamless way. A very beautiful moment of film. Here there's something in the simplicity of two people talking. So allow me to find this. Oh, that's why I need to use the mouse, isn't it, Mantautas? There we go. So this is the director, André Gregory, whose wife, Chiquita Gregory, was a very close friend of Grotowski. He was celebrated in the 60s. This is in mid-70s as an alternative theatre director coming from New York. And he met Grotowski as part of that circulation of people at that time around European and international festivals, talking to Wallace Shawn. And Wallace is basically catching up with him after a few years of not having seen him. Oh.
Conference on paratheatrical work then. And this must have been about 5 years ago. And Grotowski and I were walking along Fifth Avenue, and we were talking. See, he'd invited me to come to teach that summer in Poland, you know, to teach a workshop to actors and directors and whatever. And I told him that I didn't want to come because really I had nothing left to teach. I had nothing left to say. I didn't know anything. I couldn't teach anything. Exercises meant nothing to me anymore. Working on scenes from plays seemed ridiculous. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I just couldn't do it. So he said, why don't you tell me anything you'd like to have if you did a workshop for me, no matter how outrageous, and maybe I can give it to you. So I said, well, if you could give me 40 Jewish women who speak neither English nor French, either women who've been in the theater for a long time and want to leave it but don't know why, or young women who love the theater but have never seen a theater they could love, and if these women could play the trumpet or the harp, and if I could work in a forest, I'd come. A week later, or 2 weeks later, he called me from Poland, and he said, well, 40 Jewish women is a little hard to find. But he said, I do have 40 women. They all pretty much fit the definition. And he said, I also have some very interesting men, but you don't have to work with them. These are all people who have in common the fact that they're questioning the theater. They don't all play the trumpet or the harp, but they all play a musical instrument, and none of them speak English. And he'd found me a forest, Wally. And the only inhabitants of this forest were some wild boar and a hermit. So that was an offer I couldn't refuse. I had to go. So I went to Poland. This wonderful group of young men and women. And the forest he had found us was absolutely magical. You know, it was a huge forest. I mean, the trees were so large that 4 or 5 people linking their arms couldn't get their arms around the trees. And so we were camped out beside the ruins of this tiny little castle, and we would eat around this great stone slab that served as a sort of a table. And our schedule was that usually we'd start work around sunset, and then generally we'd work until about 6 or 7 in the morning, and then, because the Poles loved to sing and dance, we'd sing and dance until about 10 or 11 in the morning, and then we'd have our food, which was generally bread, jam, cheese, and tea, and then we'd sleep from around noon to sunset. Now, technically, of course, the situation is a very interesting one, because if you find yourself in a forest with a group of 40 people who don't speak your language, then all your moorings are gone.
What do you mean, exactly?
Well, what we do is just sit there and wait for someone to have an impulse to do something. Now, in a way, that's something like a theatrical improvisation. I mean, you know, if you were a director working on a play by Chekhov, you might have the actors playing the mother, the son, or the uncle all sit around in a room and do a made-up scene that isn't in the play. For instance, you might say to them, all right, let's say that it's a rainy Sunday afternoon on Soren's estate, and you're all trapped in the drawing room together, and then everyone would improvise, saying and doing what their character might say and do in that circumstance. Except that in this type of improvisation, the kind we did in Poland, the theme is oneself. So you follow the same law of improvisation, which is that you do whatever your impulse as the character tells you to do. But in this case, you're the character. So there's no imaginary situation to hide behind, and there's no other person to hide behind. What you're doing, in fact, is you're asking those same questions that Stanislavski said the actor should constantly ask himself as a character. Who am I? Why am I here? Where do I come from? And where am I going? but instead of applying them to a role, you apply them to yourself. Or to look at it a little differently, in a way it's like going right back to childhood, where a group of children simply come into a room or brought into a room without toys and begin to play. Grown-ups were learning how to play again.
So you would...
Okay. Oops. So few hands went up, I'm pleased to be able to introduce that film to you. It's a very beautiful account of improvisation, this idea of returning back to childhood. It's very much of its time as well, 1975, with this sense that theatre had somehow reached its limits. People like Grotowski had given up theatre earlier. People like Eugenio Barber, the living theatre, going out into the communities, abandoning the cities, going back to a different model of trying to reach an audience and trying to involve an audience. And in this case, improvisation as part of this active culture project that Grotowski was leading was seen as being one of the ways of re-sparking interest in theatre. It's interesting that Andrei Gregory, this very established international theatre director, talks about kind of having lost interest, and the people he wanted to attract had lost interest in theatre, in their form. But I'm going to read another brief account of active culture experience. And it's really important that we do remember when this was. This, as I say, was in the 70s. I was born, but I was a young child at that time. So this is one of the descriptions. Because everyone involved in paratheatre was a participant, there were no spectators, there were no observers. Some couple of journalists who were very close to Grotowski were invited in and did write about it, but it wasn't for an external audience. But there was a book called On the Road to Active Culture, which is collected by Leszek Kolankiewicz, a very good Polish scholar, which brings together different accounts and first-hand ethnographic experiences, autoethnographic experiences of that time. So bear with me while I read this. Forests of Poland in 1970s. We're digging in the earth like boars. We throw ourselves on it all together. We climb a huge tree. We swing on a rope. We walk in a line, one behind the other, with our eyes closed. We sing. We give one another apples on the moss. We dig ourselves in a heap of leaves. We wash ourselves with grain. We run, the whole bunch of us, in the river. We fall into the net and immerse in the water. We jump headlong into the muddy pit. We dance in the barrels with hot water. We wipe ourselves with conifer needles. We roast meat, keep watch by our fires. We dance frantically on the flaming earth. We fly into the pillar of fire. Motionless in the forest clearing, we take leave of the departing sun. In the morning, we welcome it murmuring, standing closely in a circle. I wallow in the soil. So you can see there were some scenographic elements, the barrels, the grain, that were put into this natural environment. A lot of it happened outdoors. But this idea of wallowing in the soil, many of us now might, certainly I think, as Grotowski did, this is a kind of wallowing self-indulgence. This emotive soup that Grotowski referred to earlier. So, this is Grotowski's position later in an interview with Marco Fumaroli, where he says this word improvisation once meant something. It's something he'd used in his actor training with exercises, developing exercise, but then he saw it as pretentious, something as a substitute for work. Child's play, let's say. Andrei Gregory talks about children playing. This is actually from 1969, so it's before he went into this paratheatrical work. Later on in the text, Performer from 1990, he has this plea, don't improvise, please. It has to be precise. Find the actions, this idea of physical actions that he followed from Stanislavski, taking care that they are mastered. Again, this idea of mastery, that you have to know your discipline, you have to know your exercise, you have to know your techniques before you then move into playing an improvisation. Otherwise, you create something banal, again, this emotive soup. And he comes back to this problem that he has dealing with chaos, improvisation as chaos, and improvisation where you're readapting a structure, you're playing with a structure, what he calls harmonic improvisation. Again, it's interesting that he uses language from music. Score, harmony, harmonic improvisation. But all the time behind this is this problem of the banalities, cliches. And partly this is coming out of Grotowski's own success. He was so lauded around the world when he took his shows to New York in the late 60s, people queuing up overnight for tickets. They were very expensive. He had very small audiences, but it created a huge impact. And it created imitators. So there were people working in Grotowski's method, a word that Grotowski said he never had a method. But people talked about the Grotowski method. They used these trances, they imitated trances, they imitated rituals, they carried people above their heads, they were pretended to be savages, all these cliches as he saw it of improvisations, which his imitators were using in his name. So he comes back to this idea of being trained in movement, the song, the rhythm, and later his work, as he moved on from paratheatre, went back to the sources, theatre of sources, to cultural sources from different traditions, from different countries, Taiwan, India, Haiti, Mexico, different traditional practices, and going back again to the technique, the root techniques of performance forms. And finding again this, trying to find this professional credibility. But this was moving away from the amateurism, this dilettantism that he thought was plaguing the theatre imitators who copied his work in an irresponsible way. It's a very strong language. And this is where he comes to this, not terrible word, but not very polite word, of shit. Goodwill won't save the work, it's mastery. Heart, by which I understand that emotive soup, the feelings, without mastery is shit. And in some ways, this is what Stanislavski had come to at the end of his working life with the method of physical actions, which we know was not so used in its American versions, in the system, in Strasberg's work, where the way that Boleslavsky had taken Stanislavski's work into America at a particular time meant that there was a very strong focus on emotion and emotion memory, ideas that later Stanislavski moved on from and abandoned, saying you can't fix the emotion, what you can fix is the physical action. So this importance of action. If you grip your fist, if you stamp your foot, you find anger. I don't need to recall a meeting with my manager where they tell me I can't do something. So find the physical action and then the feeling will come and you can repeat. This is the nature of performance, of repetition. And this is something, again, we're having to deal with in our exploration of improvisation, the repetition of performance on a nightly basis. And where does improvisation sit within that? Oh, thank you. Wrong way. There we go. So later, after paratheatre, theatre of sources, Grotowski moved into objective drama. So this was some problem and some kind of issue he was exploring throughout his whole working life over 40 years. Here you just see a different word being used as though that's going to make the problem of improvisation go away. They talked about rendering. Rendering, it's kind of a very technical word, I suppose. I don't know how. It's a different one. I'm not sure if you understand it. To render. We render a film, is that right? When you're creating a film, it has to render before you can then actually see it. So it's a word that has quite a technological basis, but this is just, essentially it's the same word as improvisation. A somewhat suspect term, as Lisa Walford, a major scholar on Grotowski, called it. And again, in this later phase of Grotowski's work, trying to find what is objective in the arts, this problem of improvisation came up yet again. And he said that nothing good can come from improvisation. So I'm going to move now away from Grotowski's work to look at exercises, because at the beginning I talked about exercises and how Grotowski was using improvisation with exercise. And Eugenio Barber, of course, was assistant director to Grotowski during his early period of work in the 1960s, before he set up his own company, Oden Teatret, in Denmark. And it's a very beautiful article, The Amulet Made of Memory, where he talks about what exercise is for. We all do exercises all the time, but Eugenio actually stands back and say, what is it? What is in an exercise? What is it? Why is it an amulet? Why does it have this magical power, let's say, in a way that an amulet does? And they, as he says, allow us to work on repeatable forms rather than constantly finding something new. And this reminds me of Grotowski's maxim of dig deeper rather than wide. You know, don't make a huge hole, just go deeper and deeper. So this repeatable forms, but how once you've mastered, again using that same language, interesting, two male directors talking about mastery, but once they're mastered, then you have the capacity for improvisation. How you know when you've mastered it is another issue, but certainly it doesn't come the first time you try it. So in this article, he talks about an exercise and its dramaturgical potential, how it is a microcosm of dramaturgical structure. He relates it to kind of dramaturgical forms in a very general way of tragedy, comedy, farce, but I think more specifically an exercise in the way it has a beginning, a middle, and end. It can be repeated. There's a kind of structure, a story that can emerge from an exercise, and they are pure form as he describes it. And I think it's important to remember that. We think exercises might have a rather instrumental aspect in terms of warming up the body or something very specific task to get better at something. But implicitly, they also have that potential to help us to understand form, story, structure, plots. When do you begin an exercise? And in training, of course, which is my area of interest, you begin an exercise when the teacher tells you, or if you go into a room, you start warming up yourself. So how do we go from that training into performance? And this is what I'm going to focus on now. How am I doing for time, Mantautas? Because we started a bit early, did we? Another 15 minutes? 15? Oh, okay. I'm going to show you some films so you don't have to listen to me. So this was a project I did called Physical Actor Training and Online A to Z. And I'm going to show you some films which we created. In fact, we created 66 films. It's a lot. They're very short. Some were 2 minutes long. And it was focused on, physical actor training. This is my definition of training that focuses and prioritizes movement, voice, and the body rather than character, text-based work. Doesn't mean you might not go towards character or text, but you start with a different premise. And as part of the project, I was thinking, I'm getting old. Have I got the energy left to get in the studio all the time and jump around? But also I wanted to find a way of putting my experience and the experience of another teacher, Frank Camilleri, who you'll see in a minute from Malta University, putting it into some kind of form where it could be published. And because of the nature of that work coming out of Garjanitsa, Grotowski's work was very vocal, physical work, for me, writing about it wasn't an appropriate form. I have written about Garjanitsa's work, I have written about Suzuki, about actor training, but how do you describe the timbre of the voice? How do you show the development of technique? How do you show failure in training in written form? So we decided to make films. The question then is, how do you reduce hours of training into an accessible format that students will be able to engage with? So we created an A to Z. One of my publications, which I'm now working on the 3rd edition for my sins, We started this in 2000, and now 2023, we're doing the 3rd edition. It's called the Routledge Companion to Theatre and Performance. It's an A to Z in 3 sections: concepts, people, and practices. And in each of those sections, we just go from Artaud, Barber, Brecht, through to Zeami, for example. So it's an A to Z. We're familiar with A to Z as a lexicon. And here we wanted to create a way of organizing training in a way that people could, if they were interested in rhythm, they can look at our rhythm. If they're interested in acrobatics, A, or breath, B, they can look at that. So there's short films about each of those. Z was difficult. X is X-ray, what's going on inside the body, and we use some digital techniques to look at kind of what's happening inside the body when you're working in training. But yes, we made these films, and it's published, unfortunately, behind a paywall and Drama Online. But at the time when we produced it in 2018, we thought either we put it with a big publisher, Drama, Methuen, Drama Online, or it might languish in obscurity on a website that no one ever sees. But the price we paid is that institutions have to subscribe. Never mind, that's another conversation. So I'm going to show you some of these films. And one of the films we have our eye, as well as imagery, is improvisation. So I'll show you that first. Then I'm going to show you some of the training films, and then how we started to go from training into performance. Right. It's my folder. Mantas, where's my folder? Ah, where is it? So I'm just looking for, here we go. Thank you. Fine, got it, thank you. Okay, so this is, I can show you the website, but these are just the individual films, and we had to put a disclaimer. We felt it's health and safety to put a disclaimer for each film, so you'll see that repeated. I think one of the interesting things for us to think about is, of course, when you train, you go into a studio, 3 hours later you leave the studio, and somehow you've achieved something together, and you have a plan of what you're going to achieve. Within that, you might deviate and improvise, but more or less you have a kind of linear structure. When you break it up into an A to Z, how do you have no control over how the student or the viewer is going to watch it. They might look at anything in a random order. There's 66 films. So we need this consistency in that they're all designed in the same way. They all have this disclaimer about health and safety at the beginning. But somehow we had to kind of let them stand on their own, autonomously, but also be part of a whole program with these different films. Oh, all right.
So improvisation is one of those, yet another problematic terms, if you want, because it's one word, but it refers to a number of different things in actor training and also in performance. It could be a form of performance when you're improvising on stage, like a jazz improvisation, but we're not really addressing that area in this here. Working technically on an exercise, all right, and then developing it, playing with it, exploring the different dynamics of it, that is a form of improvisation. And I think even if you are a beginner, right, that is an element of improvisation which is a good starting point. So first, learn an exercise. It could be a backward roll or one of the exercises that we've got in the A to Z, and start exploring the different dynamics of it.
Yeah, and I think you're doing that as an individual, but then perhaps as a group you all explore the backward roll, the forward roll, or a jump, and then start to play with it and start to break out of that exercise, the strict form, and rhythmically exploring it, someone rolling slowly, someone else jumping. And then you start to create a kind of a world of the performance, the strange world of people who only jump or only roll. And then you're kind of beginning to create the world of the play, if if you like, or the world of the theatre, the world of the stage. So you've improvised, but then you begin to shape it, you begin to select. Perhaps you've got an outside eye, so one of you might come out and say, oh, that was interesting, that was working, do that again. And that repetition is crucial, I think, as you move from training into performance, that you can repeat these things. Unless, of course, you are just doing a spontaneous happening.
So that capacity of working and playing with the dynamics, exploring them, that capacity then transfers itself also to this more creative or imaginative aspect, where you are exercising somehow this capacity of playing with, improvising, developing material, which then would be featured in the performance at the very end.
Yeah. Okay. So that was the first one I'll show you. So yeah, just talking a bit about improvisation, remembering that these are young students. The focus also of the project was training. The focus, just remembering these are young students. So the question of mastery, they're not masters in the way that Grotowski's actors were, but they still need a form and structure to work with. And here the form is somehow spatially defined and being in a line, and then very simple in terms of they jump or they don't jump or they fall. And there's a nice moment within that where two of the performers jump and face each other. And that moment of unexpected interaction, and then one of them falls and the other one jumps to the side. And just, unfortunately, one of the actors kind of breaks out of it. A smile comes on his face because the pleasure of that serendipity of that moment when they jump together, and he needed to stay inside it rather than coming outside of that. But finding within a structural form possibilities of interaction, of surprise, of patterns that start to emerge. But it's beginning from training. So I'm just going to show you another one of our films, which is jumping, and you'll see how technically this works. It's important that you're close to each other and that I have a good base position. My hand's on her hip. Sometimes I see some of you coming up into the stomach. That she's your girlfriend. No, I want the hand on the hip because you get a bit more support from the skeleton then. So I'm really going to lift her bones up and put them onto my thigh. So I'm going to give the impulse down. We're going to look ahead at the horizon and we're going to use the breath to control this movement. So out breath to go down, and then in breath to come up, and she just comes up. Yeah, I think of her like a little bird almost, and I push her off the impulse to come off. Good. So once more. Yeah, just important that I give her the impulse to jump off, then I'm in control of it. I give her the impulse down, so that we know that I'm. Before we heard Andrew Gregory talking about impulse in the woods, and you just not knowing what to do, but someone follows an impulse and the potential randomness of that. Here, impulse is a very different thing in that an impulse needs to be precise. It needs to know who's giving the impulse, and that you follow that impulse that is given in the hips so that they will jump up onto you. So there has to be a clear structure, otherwise you can't technically achieve the exercise. But then you can begin to take some of those aspects of technical support away. I'm ready that my base position is there. So once more.
Yeah.
Your face relaxed, Hannah. So we're just going to try jumping. I have to be ready to be a base. Mara has to give her own impulse down to come up. But if we listen to each other's breathing and are sensitive to when it's going to happen, that's fine. We can manage. Ooh, good, good. Lovely. Yeah. You can then put your arm around, just for a bit of stability. Yeah. But you don't need it at the beginning, that's the thing. Because you were there, you were perched, it's lovely. Let's try it so you can add that in. just using the breathing to listen to. Flex that right arm. That's it. Yeah, it's fine. Once more. Okay, so the rest of the film is different types of jumping. I won't show you now, but just takes you through. Good. Yeah, Antonio. And technically elaborating on. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Then let's take this into improvisation and this idea of not knowing. You don't need to seal health and safety. We're going to look at the idea of not knowing, which sounds a bit perverse, a bit contradictory. We think training might be about knowing things, learning things, but I'm following the Grotowski idea of via negativa, that sometimes actually we have to lose things, we have to forget things. So I want to go back to the idea of not knowing, that you have to not plan, not to predict, and have to be open and receptive, and sometimes out of control. So we're going to take this exercise of the thigh jump. We'll do it technically in a way. So here we know what's going to happen. Mara knows that her hand is going to go here. My hand is here. I'm going to give her the impulse down. She's then going to jump up onto my thigh. On the out breath, she goes down. In breath up, I throw her off. As soon as we take that away, all those things that we know, we're in a completely different situation. Because this is an exercise that could go either way. I could jump onto her. She could jump onto me. So I have to be ready to be both base, but also to be able to jump. So let's try it, Mara. I might try jump here, okay? Baby jump. Maybe you try baby jump, okay? So we can add in another element. You see the look of surprise on Mara's face. If I suddenly... Yeah, so we got, rather than just being a choice of me on her, her on me, with the thigh jump, we've now got another option. I don't know what it's going to be. But I certainly know when she lands. And she knows when my body is there. Yeah. What's really important, it doesn't matter if we get it wrong. As long as you're balanced and secure. If suddenly your leg's not there, I just slide off. And that whole unpredictability is really what's exciting about it. So we'll try it in the 3. Ready? Yeah? Sure. Okay. So you're just adding to the complexity, obviously. But here, still staying within the thigh jump. And moments of surprise. Kind of, yeah, well done. Okay. Okay. Great. I think it's kind of, hopefully, yeah. I'll just show a little bit of this one.
So we'll go with this split here. So this side eye and then gets back in.
Do you want to be in the again?
I'll be the leader.
So this is really the bit you saw earlier where
we have jumping, turning, and falling.
where they're working in line,
Or
and
do you wanna
they're
put a different
sticking with
setting
jumping,
to
but
it?
they're also adding falling in. So they could just stay with jumping, but they can also then add falling, and then they can add turning. So there's different elements, but I think important is not to have too many too quickly, but to add them in as the group piece evolves. So initially, I also very deliberately put the very tall person at the front, because that creates a kind of desire in the people behind to have to reach the audience to go over him.
If you go down or something.
Yeah.
So when he suddenly comes down, you suddenly see the other people there. And you see the importance of repetition, of the repetition of the jump, of not just jumping and then waiting, sometimes jumping many, many times. But all they're doing is jumping, but they're just moving in the space. They're keeping that forward look with the audience. And I like this idea that welcome to the planet with people who just jump. That's all they do. Oh, they might fall as well. But these are the jumpers. The jumpers and the fallers. That's what they do. Also, I'm not interested in different ways of jumping. They're just jumping, so it's very simple. So its structure is the form is quite simple. So the mastery is easy. I think visually we start to get interested in the music of it, the patterns. Okay. Last little bit. So this is a important word, I think, in improvisation. It's flow. This is not an improvisation. This is a technical training exercise. I'll just show it to you technically first of all. You see the impulse from the pelvis to come up, and then they follow it through.
You're holding their hands, but leave them away from their back.
And then you can see how what is an exercise, a training exercise, when you put it into a structure of people doing it together, suddenly it becomes, I think, quite aesthetic, quite powerful. And the filmmaker, Stacey Lee Bennett, couldn't help but add waves just to add an oral dimension to it. Okay. I think I'm going to end there. Hopefully it's clear what I'm saying. You can see, rather than have to talk too much about it, how you move from training, start to move into performance. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Yes, thank you. So, questions, please. Some hands. We might, yes. Okay. So let's see. Maybe first here and then, yes.
Hi.
It's better because people can't hear you if you are not.
when you had when you showed these exercises, I just saw concrete places, public places, like in the market. It would be so great. Or yeah. Or in Calvary, just many people are standing. And wanted to ask, do you do like those in public places and like this improvisation from these exercises, or no?
Thank you. No, but what a lovely idea. It'd be quite good now, wouldn't it, to try? I think that's a really good question, because actually it gets to the heart of actually training is something we do closed away in the studio, and it's invisible to many people. And they only ever see the result, although we don't see the result because it should become second nature. So I think part of why I was interested in this film project was to really show the process of training, to show failure. So one of the longer films we did was a documentary, 45 minutes, where we lined up the student participants at the end of the project and said, talk to us about the project, about how you might use it in performance, how you might, what references you've got from any reading you've done, and they just talked. It was beautiful. And we just basically edited it into a documentary film of them talking with some exercises cut in here and there to illustrate it. So I think this impulse to use training in a more explicit way is very much part of what you're talking about. I haven't ever been brave enough to take it out. There was a film I was going to show you by a company called Optique, someone I worked with a long time ago. And his work has been taken out from the studio into all kinds of public venues. And the premise of the work that he did at that time was that the form of the work was just walking, running, in lines, rather like viewpoints, using this very simple structures, very simple actions again. So the problem of mastery is not as sophisticated as some of these exercises. It's just walking and running, a trio. And what would happen is that someone would walk past a member of the public, and somehow they become part of the performance. And they're using the outdoor spaces to interact with as well. So I invite you to take it forward. Yeah, maybe you should try this and do it outdoors. Particular venue you're thinking of? You said somewhere, did you? Where? Sorry? Where did you say you'd like to do it?
In a marketplace, especially when there are traditions, old or like long traditions and queues or something like, and at first to talk with security, and in the marketplace, and another supermarket where you stand and people are jumping. You just and yeah, I think there could be from people reaction. There could start to be dialogue and. We did some improvisation under the bridge because it was raining. We were the students. We appeared under the bridge, and two people were a bit sitting and drinking beer in another riverside. So when we had dialogue, half an hour with them, improvisation. No, maybe it's yeah.
Thank you. It's very refreshing, because I think one of my preoccupations as well as I was not born when Grotowski was doing this training work, and it's very much of its time, this mastery of Eugenio Barber, who's in his 80s. Grotowski died in 1999. And how do we use training today? How can we kind of take it away from this rather precious, male-dominated, very heavy seriousness that is needed in training? Training's hard work, but also it can be fun. And I think that's one thing we were very aware of making these films, that two white middle-aged men, Frank and myself, preaching to the students is not going to engage them. So we had a lot of fun. One of the films we made is called Fundamentals, bit of a play on words. And I realized that actually what we hadn't made in the films was, what we hadn't understood or presented was the basics, like actually how when you come into a studio, you need to be wearing the right clothes, you need to have water, you need all the fundamental basics that precede any kind of exercises. So with the students, we made a very fun film about the fundamentals. So I think that improvisation can help open up something that has been behind closed walls, that's been very serious, that's been very heavy, that can become intimidating and frightening to students, actually to be a place of pleasure and exploration. So thank you for your idea. I'll try it. Exactly, yeah, to bring them in. Yeah, exactly. Anyone else?
Yes, anyone else? Yes, I'll pass by the mic.
Need 2 mics, but we haven't.
Yeah, it's like we have a shortage of mics in the building.
So, as I understand, you support the view that art without mastery is shit, right? Yes, but what about mastery without heart? Is that a possibility, and does mastery bring the heart to the surface eventually, or does it actually make it, is this a possibility, and what? Actually, yes, I have thought about it while you were talking about it, and I think that you were out about clenching that fist, and that anger comes when you do that. So probably that's how it works with the mastery also. You can do something with the mastery, and eventually emotion should come. That's kind of what I thought.
Not always, but it can come. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's very good question. Again, gets to the heart of what I'm interested in, and perhaps other people. That interesting. I brought Eugenio Barber in because if you've seen his work with Ode and Theatret, I think it's often been reviewed and criticized for being very technical and lacking a kind of emotional aspect in a way that Grotowski's work was incredibly emotional and yet very precise. And I think, for me, what I've seen of Eugenio's work, it has this incredible mastery, but it lacks the kind of heart. And there's something about the situation that Grotowski was working in Poland in the 60s, the depression, the poverty, poor theatre was his concept, but it was also incredibly poor society in many ways at that time. So the oppression that generated the kind of images of constant prints and the kind of archetypal work that they were doing to avoid censorship brought a kind of heart that went alongside the mastery. So I think it's very easy just to over-focus on technique and lose that spirit and that heart. So I think you're right, but it can come. But there also, you need to be able to have times when you just focus on the technique. My worry is today, with students, they're not interested in mastery, they're not interested in technique, they just want the instant satisfaction, they want the kind of the heart. And it's readily available in reality TV and social media. So how do we get back to re-establishing these terms that have become kind of bad words, like, mastery, hierarchy. I'm writing a piece about the language around training where you have to invite people to do something. In English, it's a very common invitational language. It's coming out of kind of communication studies. And you hear it a lot in drama workshops where staff say to students, I invite you to the floor. And it's like, are they really inviting, or actually they're just using this language to make it seem like they're somehow being consensual? So I think there's a lot of rhetoric around consent and inclusion and diversity, which is needed in some ways, but also it is, I think, very problematic. Where does authority lie? Teachers have authority, they have expertise, they have history, and students have to be able to accept that. And it doesn't mean that we're going to bully them or we're going to dominate them. We need to listen to them as well, but they also have to understand that sometimes you have to work hard and try and master something. Sorry, a bit of a digression, but it's a really pressing concern, I think. I saw Ramunė nodding. I don't know whether you find this. Kiki. Lovely Kiki. Have to thank Kiki as well for... You'll meet Kiki tomorrow, but Kiki's been fantastic. I was going to show you a film from Greece in the summer when I did some of this work with people that she'd organised in 43 degrees in Athens.
Thank you. Thank you.
Organising a fantastic project in Marathon, building a drama school, an NFA program, if I may say, working with colleagues like Ramunė, myself. So fantastic ambition to focus on very physical acting and really strong technique. And keep it over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm not a star. I want to live in my privacy, but sometimes, you know. So I will give me 3 minutes to explain something. So the word mastery, first of all, it's the mistranslation from the Latins, from the Greek wise, demiurgos, creator, craftsman, and Aristotle connected with the artist, the craftsman, and the generals, the leader. So they mistranslated the word. So this word comes now with all that difficulties, and we are stuck with the words centuries now, and this is the result now, a chaos in our communities. So war and conflicts. If we start to analyze a lot and we start to have opposite opinions about the words, so as Hamlet says, words. So mastery means skills, means from craftsman. It connects with the work, and so this is the etymology of the work. So this means for Aristotle, in order to be a teacher, you have to be someone who possesses the knowledge, the episteme of the subject. Otherwise, you are not a teacher at all. So for Aristotle, in order to transmit the knowledge, you have to possess it and to open the discussion for further questions. So this means research. So the other thing is that about emotions. Why there is that discussion between physical and emotion things? We are the whole and complete organism. So it's not about emotion, it's not about physical, it's about human being. So when we are working on works like acting, or let's say a physician, or let's say that you are driving a car, you have to concentrate. And what it's happened is that the brain can erase the emotional aspects in order to do these things. So, but there are other things inside. It's not emotion, it's enthusiasm. It's like the warriors. They went to the battle not with emotions, because if you have emotions, you have no clear picture what we have to do. This kind of enthusiasm is what we are lack today, and we are stuck, and we live in a misery, and we are live with the materials, and we don't understand the values. And the values are not emotions. The values is that I care for other people, and I have syngenesis, and I have that passion to live with the others. It's not about emotion. And emotion is also the problem with the depression. So what is the added depression? Is to have your soul in an upper state. So Aristotle says that it's not about to lose your emotion, it's to control yourself, to do the right thing in front of you. And in order to do that, you have to be brave, and you have to work forward. So there is no way to conflict because of them. You can have emotions. If you are doing your work very well, you can have emotions. But if you have emotions, sometimes the brain doesn't work in the way you understand. For example, if you are doing classical ballet, you don't have, it's impossible to have emotions, but you have something else inside you. You have the power of life. And so this is anti-cataplectic. This is anti-depression thing. And this is superior to everyday life. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you very much for this comment. Yes. Well, we have to finish, but like half a minute.
Just a small comment. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kiki, for such an insightful explanation. I know we are short of time, but I'm just very curious about your opinion. On the question, first of all, I think that's the very important message for the young actors and for the whole Halo community, that in order to be a good improviser, you have to be very technical or skillful. But my question would be about mastery or skills or technique. How, to what extent does it depend on the cultural context? And the exercises you were demonstrated, how much are they connected to a certain cultural tradition? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the cultural context is everything, of course, but the cultural context might not be one we want to work in, and we have to resist the cultural context. I suppose a lot of my working experience was doing the Andrzej Gregory running in the Polish forests in 89, 93, working with Gardzianica, and which is, you know, the director has later been part of the Me Too scandal, very serious allegations against him, particularly from women. So the joy we had, the exploration, the kind of violence of technique as it was then, it was accepted, but has now been looked at very differently. And I think that's what worries me, I suppose, is that the cultural context is one of judgment, always, of re-evaluating the past, of looking for scapegoats and looking for ways of making things easy. So I've been trying throughout my working career to bring some of the best things from the Polish practice, the rigor, the discipline, the exercises, but assimilating it in a way that is not going to frighten people off, and it does allow young people to participate. But it's such a permissive culture at the moment, certainly in the UK I'm talking about, that's what I know best. For me, I was teaching in Palermo this year. I taught a session in India, and the students approached the work without any irony, without a kind of coolness, without self-consciousness that is very prevalent amongst our students. Mental health is such a massive issue amongst our students in the UK, but certainly in those contexts, I'm sure there are mental health issues, but they're not dominating. So the cultural context is everything, but we have to work with it, but also against it. That's all I can say.
Thank you very much, Allain. Thank you for beautiful starts. Okay, and so now we welcome Matas. We intentionally mixed the sessions. I like to have presenters from different disciplines. I think that would be much more interesting. And yeah, the floor is yours. I think you can try to open your...
Check. Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. It's a great honor, so thank you Mantautas, thank you Ramunė, thank you Ilmata, thank you all for letting this happen. It's a huge opportunity for me. Though I have a really limited time, and I was thinking so hard how to get through, and sorry if I maybe from time to time be a bit too fast. But today I'm going to present, as I call, some kind of a bird view of my artistic research. It is research through practice or based on practice. I'm improviser, composer, also a researcher, and maybe just to make things clear and to make things clear for the future of my presentation, I just introduced just fastly my background. So I started as a saxophone player, as a jazz saxophone player, but I never wanted to be a soloist or a front man, as we musicians call. I always wanted just to find some beautiful things in music and stay there. But I really was fascinated with improvisation, and in Lithuania it just happened that way, that I didn't have any opportunity to go into improvisation spheres, so I chose jazz. But after some while I wanted to say bored. I was not maybe bored, but I wanted to find some new opportunities, so I started this contemporary experimental music, and after that I went into electronics, and today you cannot see saxophone here, but you can see modular synthesizer, and that's my everyday friend. And that's what I do, and there's a silly word called electroacoustics, but that's what I do. And I improvise with electroacoustics, and I try to equate both of these worlds. I don't think they are really different, although they sometimes feel different. Yeah, so let's dive in. A bit about my research. So it's called, as you can see, encoding and decoding of improvised music in normal people language, not non-academic people language. It's the idea of transfer of the idea from one consciousness to another. So I'll talk about it a bit later, but that's the translation into human language, if I may. I really liked what was Paul talking about the, how did you call it? It was not balance and control, but yeah. So I like that when I started this research, I was thinking that I'm kind of original and doing something, but the more I go into, I can see that all the different people from all the different spheres are doing not the same thing, but I think that's why academic world is beautiful to me, because we are pursuing this one strange idea which we cannot describe in words, and doing this several days sessions. So I think it's important. So I really like to look at improvisation as a balance between chaos and control. And chaos for me is this endless generation of ideas, and control is maybe what Paul called the mastery or skill. And I think that artistic product is not, let's say, valuable if you don't have either, at least one of those. You have to find balance between those two. Yeah, and there's several themes which I'm not afraid to show on the slides, because I wrote a lot about it. But there are a lot of more which I try to fit in. As a part composer, so maybe I didn't say that I play, perform, but I also compose. So form is quite an interesting concept for me, and I try to look at form not in a conventional way, and try to break from the rules that I was taught in the school in the early years. And I have found some pretty cool concepts which I adapt and take into my research, and you will see some of them. Of course, the attentive listening team, it would be a different presentation, and I could talk about that for a long time, but I have to be precise and fast, so that's, as I call it, the bird view. Yeah, so this encoding, decoding word, it didn't fell from the sky. It was used by Stuart Hall. So he's a cultural researcher. He was one of the founding figures of Birmingham School of Cultural Studies. Here you can see at the second point his book, where I read his theory about this encoding and the decoding principle. Though the main idea of encoding and decoding for Stuart Hall was to create some kind of non-linear, as he said, system, to create a message. It could be an advertising message, it could be political message, so it was not tightly connected to music, but I was thinking, and I think I'm not the only one, that art itself is a language, is a communication, and it's quite good to adapt theories from communication and vice versa. According to Stuart Hall, there are 4 steps of encoding and decoding process, which are called production, circulation, distribution, and reproduction. And I will now cite his thoughts about these steps. So to think of encoding and decoding process in terms of a structure produced and sustained through the articulation of linked but distinctive moments, these four. I want to emphasize the words that he said, linked but distinctive. So these steps are like different steps and could be made by different people, by different actors, but they can also be made and consumed and produced by one artist. So I think it is really interesting to adapt this idea into this nowadays interdisciplinary artist world and improvisation as well. Yeah, so now I just read the citations from Stuart Hall, and we'll show you some examples. So he used pretty precise terminology for these four of these steps that I showed you. Production is the stage of message construction. It is based on technical infrastructure of the type of media used, personal professional experience, assumptions about the future audience. I think you can say the same about theater and music. Circulation is the phase which reflects how individual perceives certain symbols. Consumption is the presentation of encoded message in the form of a meaningful discourse. And reproduction is the stage during which the individual has received the message and decoded reacts in one way or another. And this saying by Stuart Hall, meaningful discourse, it catch my ear, catch my eye, and I was really thinking a lot about it. And it was 2020 when I found this video I'm going to show you. It's just a random video I found on YouTube. It's made by Scott Robinson, saxophone player. As a saxophone player, I really relate to what he was doing and maybe explain some things to you guys. But I didn't know him before this video, and I haven't heard about him after, so I don't know about his musical mastery or anything. But I thought that it's like a perfect examples for encoded message in a meaningful discourse. So the main idea is guy takes his saxophone and plays without breathing for 9 minutes. It's called the circular breathing technique. It's an extended technique where you can sustain a long note for any period of time. It just depends on your physicality, and 9 minutes is quite hard. And he's doing it on baritone saxophone, so the lower timbre of the instrument, the harder it is to control the airflow and all the stuff. So he's using this technique to represent one tragic event which happened with George Floyd. I hope everybody know this story. Yeah, so I think maybe I'll talk about what I think later. I will just read what Scott Robinson is writing in the description of the video. I doubt I'm the last musician, and maybe not the first, who will want to create a musical piece for 8 minutes and 46 seconds duration. The exact length of time it took for a man's life to ebb away on a horrifying video we all have seen in the news. After I first saw some of the footage, I wept trying to describe it to my wife. I was extremely disturbed what I saw. Soon after that, the protests began, and they have continued. When I finally heard on the news the astonishing amount of time that actually elapsed while the man and many bystanders pleaded in vain for his life, I knew I had to memorialize that number somehow. How long is 8 minutes 46 seconds? Very late that night, I dressed in black and went out to my lab to make this video. It was done in one take. All of the flaws and the struggles you will hear will be considered a part of the piece. It was not fun to make, and it is probably no more fun to listen to, nor should it be. And just some excerpts. Yeah, so don't worry, I'm not gonna show the whole 10 minutes video. I just cut it into 3 pieces which I think are important and makes a form, at least for me, for this improvisation. So you saw the beginning of this improvisation, if I may. You can already see the struggle in the first breathe-ins, and after some time, the musician changes the note. It happens exactly at the center of these 9 minutes. And I want to show you this part, and I don't know why he does that. He lowers the note, I think, by perfect 5th or 4th, can't remember now. But that's even harder to do with the circular breathing, so maybe that's some kind of masochistic choice, but let's see that. It has been like 4 minutes now. Yeah, and I don't know if you can hear that the high-end spectrum is coming out. The more he does it, the more high spectrum we have. If I would be a composer and I would write a piece, I would do the same with the rising pitches, but it happens naturally just because the guy is struggling. So I think it's a perfect example for meaningful discourse and encoding. And I'll show you just the ending of this video, just to show that he really done it. It's like last 1 minute, I think. And how does it sound, of course? I think you don't have to play saxophone to really grasp the hardness of this thing. And there's one little more quote from Scott Robinson. There's one quoting. There's one more thought I would like to share. I've never done anything like this before and wasn't sure I could get through it. By the end, I was shaking. You could see that. And some desperation was starting to creep in. But there came a moment when my timer showed about 1 minute 20 seconds remaining that I realized I was going to make it. Sadly, that moment never came for George Floyd. I'm reading this not because of emotional, of course, it's really emotional, but I think it's a part of the encoding and decoding process, and if we wouldn't read it, we wouldn't grasp it so much. We would just see the guy playing a long note and struggling to do that, which is also interesting maybe. But I think encoding and decoding process is multiple multiverse creativity, some kind of different impulses coming into this creator, performer, or whatever you call him, and he tries to somehow control this chaos and find the balance. And in one way, you can say that the primal idea of this encoding and decoding process is just circular breathing technique on saxophone, but on the other hand, you can say that it's a pretty strong political message using this technique of extended saxophone playing. Yeah, so what you see here is what I proudly call theoretical infrastructure of my research. So I believe that painting this or creating this scheme helps me to analyze every creative process, whether it's music, theater, or anything. So there are maybe some few things that I would like to explain, but I have not so much time, so I'll be fast. I think that there's two levels of encoding and decoding happening in the process. The first level is happening between the creator and the performer in a classical way, or in a theatrical, maybe classical thinking. It will be a director and actor, or a composer and performer. So the first level of encoding, decoding happens there because creator has the idea. It transfers the idea into some kind of a medium. It could be like Ableton project, it could be modular patch, it could be notes, it could be verbal, I don't know, suggestions. And performer does something with this material and creates another layer of new I don't know, content. And the second level of encoding and decoding happens, of course, between performer and consumer. But of course, you can see at this that the whole process is also called encoding and decoding. So I see at this scheme as a lot of one big gestalt and a lot of little sub gestalts inside, and that way I can really focus and analyze the situation. So if I take Scott Robinson's example, I look at the idea pool. I call it. We musicians always ask each other, "What is your background?" "Oh, I'm jazz background." "Oh, I'm classical background." So I think the idea pool is this background. It's not about jazz or classical. It's about skill set. It's about cultural preferences. It's about the instrument you use. So for Scott Robinson, it was saxophone. It was a political idea, a social idea, and it was using of an extended technique in a way to express this big emotion. So primal idea is constructed during this purification, which I have done fastly. And yeah, and this primal idea goes to the final idea, which we create as a consumers. And maybe I'll just go through of these terms. So all of this scheme I just divide into three parts. So there's active actors, which are creator, performer, and consumer. There are passive actors, which is primal idea, idea spool, of course, algorithm, artistic product, and final idea, and processes, which is purification, encoding, decoding, encoding. And you can already see the first level, second level, and I hope you understand why I call it second and first level. So between the creator and performer, it happens. You can say that it is happening two encoding, decoding processes at the same time. So performer is decoding the information from the creator, and at the same time encoding information for the consumer. Yeah, so as I said before, three main active actors. Of course, in my research, in my rules, all of these roles could be played by one actor, and it happens from day to day to me in my studio. That's how these thingies come up to paper. Some of passive actors: primal idea, code, medium, algorithm, artistic product, final idea. There are some you cannot see you couldn't see in the scheme. So code is reflects maybe the stored whole, what is by stored whole called circulation. So it means how we reflect different things. So if we live under the rock, or maybe just don't have an internet, this Scott Robinson idea would be a different code for us, you know. Medium is what I called. I took this idea. Can't remember the researcher name. Okay, we'll remember, I bet. So the medium is just a tool, just a physical thing which you use to express your idea and to transfer your idea from your abstract mind into some kind of paper, I don't know, verbal saying, or something like that. Yeah, as I said before, there are processes, and maybe I just want to, because I'm getting pretty quickly, I just want to read about the purification process, because I think it's really important. And as you can see in the scheme, purification process should happen after during every process. So you should be thinking about primal idea of this piece or event, whether you are a consumer, a performer, or creator, and you can be in whatever place and time. I think it's really important to have a strong backbone, what I call primal idea, which I think what happened in Scott Robinson example, and it doesn't really happen that strongly every time, but it's really, I think, healthy to look in improvisation in that way, because you can then analyze improvisation by an academic constructs and just leave the metaphysics for for metaphysics. Yeah, let's just skip this through. Yeah, so encoding and decoding process could also be not the primal idea of encoding and decoding process could also be not the musical or economic or I don't know, emotional thing. It could also be a adapted concept from different researchers, what I do in my research. And here we can see Milton Myrmekidis, a composer, in his book Changes Over Time. So what you see here is and like I don't know how to say, it's like a form maybe of improvisation made by John Coltrane of the piece Love Supreme, and maybe I'll play you just a little bit of it and you will see. Oh yeah, maybe I should explain what's happening. So Milton Myrmekidis just painted this 3D cube, and of course there are many more dimensions in art and in music, but he just wanted to emphasize these three. So metric placement on one axis, it means like where the same phrase is going time-wise. Parameter 2 is rhythmic separation, the phrase the sparseness and the density of a phrase. And chromatic transposition means like higher or lower. So you can hear that in Coltrane's improvisation. Yeah, so maybe I wanted to speak about a bit more about this M space, but I don't have many time and I still want to play. So, because I'm an artist at first place. So now I want to interpret this M space, and I've created this little simple cube, and I wanted to travel from point A to point B. And this is this encoding principle, as I call it, is neither here nor there, because it would be much easier to do it on an acoustical instrument, on saxophone or piano, and it's quite easy to do, quite hard to do this on modular synth. And on the other hand, you can do much more complex things on the modular synth, but I'm kind of restricted and have these quite harsh restrictions under my control. But I found it really inspiring, and maybe I'll find some kind of new way from point A to B. Let's see. I'll do it just really quick. you very much.
Thank you, Matas. A quick question or two? Yes. Running.
Thank you, Matas. So if we go back to this example of circular briefing, the musician has the task play the note the longest like as possible, but in the end you found interesting these overtones when his lips kind of tired and he started to play overtones. So from like his task and this perspective, this is like mistake. And my question, like, is it possible that your idea about decoding and decoding can help to find ideas in mistakes? From this perspective, what do you think?
Oh, I can use this one. Yeah. Check.
Yeah, it works.
Check. So the question is, do you mean? I just want to clarify. Do you mean that my research could answer the question where you find mistakes in improvisation? There are no ones. I understand what you are asking. That's a difficult question, which I ask myself every day, and for now I stay at the position and ground position that there are no mistakes. There are mistakes. Maybe it would be a mistake for me to miss an article, an important article. It would be a mistake to miss a important concert or conference. But there are no mistakes in Scott Robinson playing or this thing. Yeah. So that's the idea for now. We'll speak about it 1 year later.
So if nobody dies, it's not a mistake, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, a quick thing, yes.
Thank you very much. I'm really impressed from your work, and also because you are using your body, and it was exactly, we were speaking before about the concentration, and I mean the idea of using that tiny movements on your body that the musicians always do with they are dealing with the tiny movements that are the more expressiveness part of the body. And you used the cube you mentioned the cube, and it reminds me Laban's ideas about space, that it's stemming from Aristotle, the cube, and the 5 stubbles from Plato, and the icosahedron perspective. But there is a connection there with Laban's dynamosphere, connecting with the dynamics of the movement and the music also, because Laban based on music, and I'm impressed this, and so maybe it will be helpful to study a little bit about Laban's dynamosphere and the way of using the 4 elements of weight, time, flow of energy, and strong qualities, because you were using the qualities and the dynamics of the body, so your movement created that sound. I mean, of course, combining movements with the technology, and so I love this idea because you combine the technology with the human effort. So it's I love it. It's very, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll maybe run here so the camera can see me. The break of half an hour. See you soon. Okay. Now you should hear us, right? Okay, perfect. So, sorry, it's too much knobs and things. So, I was saying, we have like a little experiment ready for you. I'm presented you already. So, sorry, you probably couldn't hear, that's why. Sorry for this. I can also play audio from here. You can also play it yourself. It's up to you, but maybe you want to say a few words beforehand.
Yes, first of all, I cannot see you. I don't know for some reason.
I should be, I think, it's sorry about that, like, because people need to see you. You can't see me, but you can hear me, hopefully.
No, it's okay. I can see you now.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Yes, are you ready? So can you hear me? Can you hear me?
No problem.
Okay.
Yeah, we can proceed.
Okay, great. So if I understood well, are you going to present the audio, the clip? Okay. So that is my last work I presented. It's a monologue and sound collaboration. The name of the work is called Ether, and that was staged at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama during Collisions. That's an annual festival of practice-led research in theatre and performance. So for the making of this work, I observed the images that emerged. I written them down as a script. I recorded them with voice. And while I was working on the script, I recorded also a piano score. I sent it to musician Christine Hubner, who improvised it on flute. The sound piece was mixed and integrated to accompany the monologue and the script that I had written initially, named Ether. And in this work, the voice is the main instrument, unfolding in 3 parts, accompanied by this sound piece. It's recorded in private in a period determined by COVID restrictions and forcing isolation. And the monologue describes the body and a body fleeting from its usual substance to become transparent. So the work, the presentation of it, want to see how it can also, in its turn, generate something via the response of the audience. So improvisation was present at many different stages of this process, from conception, perception, to audience reception, but I would love to see if it can also generate some movement, some note-taking, some annotation, gesture, whatever someone feels expressed, to be expressed, even movement during space. So that is all I can say for now.
Okay, so I can play the audio now, right?
Okay.
Okay, perfect. So I'm playing.
Kirsten Hubner.
Did I have a choice? It was all connected. An ecosystem, an ecology of mind, a swerve of matter, small and weaker links affecting me, the affecting dynamics. Polyphony, where are you? Can you please help? It is said that voices broaden perspective, but how? At which tone and pitch? A few voices around me, all lonely, aching. Polyphony of aching, for years listening, all kinds of sounds, screams, mutterings and whispers, but at some point my ears seemed to have lost some sense, as if a veil was over my head. Or was it a sort of void, where audible signs were muffled? Void had opened. Something opened and swallowed me, all leaving an ethereal composition in place of my body, like dust or smoke. Was the smoke like that of a car leaving, or that of a chimney, or no, the smoke a magician reveals when he does a trick, and voila, it emerges from somewhere. So this smoke was my body, or what was left after the void had swallowed me, and this smoke could move. So my old figure had turned into some sort of steam. So it wasn't a death, or like in Hiroshima, where the human body disappeared and a trace was left, a shadow on the ground. This undefined material composition that replaced my body could move, walked very ethereally, a very different type of ether, not the one we feel with the wind when we are on the boat sailing and there is this breeze seeping into our pores and pulsating and waving our skin, but one, a steam with vectors floating in it, swirling, turning, circling, swerving, my new body. And a thread, yes, a thread, leading to another substance that felt like pressed air, like a balloon floating a bit further. So this balloon was held by the thread and connected it with the ethereal substance. That thread was undoubtedly a form of persistence, existence, not letting this ethereal part separate from the pressed part to wander in the air. So a new body, a superposition, inner workings of materials, superconductive, very intricate, billions of atoms, emergence in condensed matter, no predictive ability by me whatsoever, velocity unfolding in time. Electrons can form an entangled state where all billions of electrons are aware of each other, different emergent system, spontaneous symmetry breaks, and we do not know which direction the vectors are going to choose. A new form of symmetry? I tried to rationalize it. Years after, I thought it was a case of magnetism, that the atoms of a body were demagnetized and left the area where the body was and started floating like ether, a substance, shadowy, transparent, see-through, untouchable, and penetrable at the same time. A contradiction. And this thread connecting the pressed air and the ether, everything had become so paradoxical. Was it heat that caused this demagnetization, extreme pressure, a phase transition, a false reflex, superconduction? Was I able to resist this force field that led my body to feel like steam? Was this steam a quantum protectedness that held everything together even though at that steamy and smoky state? And how could I have survived as ether for so long, an empty sack, a hologram, a phantasm, and the thread moving, vibrating, the spine of this bizarre composition, these millions of dust particles and the pressed atmosphere, this thread so available to the whims of the weather, a follower, a witness, a line that can move and be shaken with the slightest force of gust of wind. That was my bizarre body. Could I move the thread if I wanted? I think I ran once, but I didn't feel I was moving. Time didn't flow. Where was I? In the thread? In the ether? In the air? The ethereal composition looks like it's moving when I move, therefore I must be somewhere there. For these kinds of observations, I must change my system of logic. Quite still. I guess that is good for a change. Or maybe not, something has changed. The ethereal composition approaches the thread, so close to the point that it gets back and fills the thread, forms a body. My body. My body. It is lying on the bed. I'm lying on the bed. Looks like I cannot move, and I cannot even breathe. I try to get up. There is no air. I must minimize movement. I must minimize breath. Okay, gently, very gently flow. Even if it's a small amount, it will be enough. Enough for the moment to pass. For endurance. This body to visit, to come back now that I cannot breathe, now that I must lie in this bed. I have no other choice now but to wait for the next small quiet birth. Close the eyes, calm down, and think of a sun. I could be lying on the beach in an afternoon summer day on sand that has taken the shape of my body, wind sweeping the top of my knees. Can someone explain to me this phase transition, please? Could I have avoided it? I don't think so. They say disruption happens before we sense it. Chemical changes happen before biological ones appearing. I cannot remember the moment the shift into ether happened. And so I can't remember the moment when this pressed air started to connect again with this pressed air through this funny thread. And I cannot recall the signs where this ether shifted back into flesh. How is time position the one lost and rearranged? I do feel something though as I breathe now subtly. My arms move. Or maybe not. Well, they want to. The ether is still there. I thought it was gone. But now it's here along with my body. Now it's like a cloud surrounding me. Quite fascinating feeling, being in a cloud on a bed. I'm glad the body's back. Too bad that it is now that I'm in this bed. What else can happen here? My hands try to lift. So funny. They go in slow motion. They lift and stay midways. Too tired. I'll put them down. Must save some energy at this stage. Another paradox. At this stage where the body is back, the air has lessened. All this pressed air I had for so long, I could use some now. Where is this now? My hands lift. Okay, why not? This time they lift higher. On a V shape. What are you doing? I say to myself. Then myself replies, what is it? you idiot. This is the sign of victory.
Okay. Thank you. So,
Thank
do
you
we
so
have?
much for listening. I don't know if someone moved around space. I would wish I could see if someone felt the need to get up from chair and move. That would be also, it's part of the experience. I don't know, the whole script was influenced, definitely I must say. I'm part of a research group. It's called Entanglement, led by Johnny Golding, a philosopher that we always had meetings and supervisions by professors of physics. And we had a quantum physics professor that we had repeatedly long hour sessions talking about entanglement and phase transition and how energy moves and matters. Somehow, because we're trying to find ways and how we create, how we make sense of things. So I guess there was a lot of vocabulary from this field, but I hope it was overall a good prompt for improvisation.
Thank you. Maybe there are some questions.
Yeah, of course.
Anybody from the audience?
I don't see anyone though, but
Ah, yes, we have one.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm curious about the format you have chosen. What were your expectations when choosing this format? Because you said that you expected that somebody would stand up and move around. So, yeah. What were your expectations regarding perception of your presentation? Thank you.
yes, of course, yes. First of all, you've noticed that I've kind of deliberately left some parts in there, like even sound that mixes that they where the breath of the narrator is also similar with the breath of the performer. I wanted this to be very present so that somehow the audience could feel the freedom to move in a way. I don't know if they couldn't be moved because I guess the imagery of the body imagery is very elaborate, and I wanted some response into this body that loses its substance. How can someone understand their body, and if there is some insight coming in them about their bodies at that time. I thought that maybe it would be looking to be expressed. So I was hoping for someone who could activate themselves, like writing or basically making the experience on their own in a way. So it would not be about the work anymore. It would be about them listening and things coming out of their experience and their present moment. So if there are some notes, notations, or something that someone did, for me that would be the ideal to see, and that would be something that was a prompt of something else.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Alan?
Just curious, where'd you go next with this? Obviously, it's great you're presenting it here. I'm sorry we didn't move, but it's quite hard when we're remote.
Yeah.
Perhaps if you'd been here and being able to set it up, it might have encouraged us more. But there was movement inside, if not external movement. How do you present this? Where does it sit in relation to any further dissemination? You know, where does it belong? I suppose I'm wondering.
Yeah, it's a bit hybrid, the form, of course. For me, it sits within a theory and investigation about the image of thought. And this plane of immanence, that it's an image that we have access sometimes consciously but also subconsciously. so I try to visualize some imagery. In a way, I believe that we have to just somehow try to give space for this image to emerge. It is hybrid in the sense that I would like to present it more in the context of some sort of workshop that aims to bring people close to their own energy, in a sense, like trying to help them realize that how they can move through things, even if it's something audio and participatory or not. So far it was presented once, and the audience also made drawings, and they had some feedback. So it really varies. It depends on the moment and the place it's been audioed. So my expectation would be, yes, just provide a moment of that. Simply as if someone could listen to it and feedback to their thoughts and to themselves, that would be the aim of it. Okay.
Yeah, one more question, one moment.
Thank you very much. It was really experience, like to look to inside myself and to feel different things. And I wanted to ask, what inspired you soundtrack? Mainly like words, ideas, or frequencies of a voice, of person, or what was the first impulse for this instrumentation? Like beautiful melodies who lead it to this history, not history, the story. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the story behind. Yes. Of course, I had some theoretical training about theater. So my degree was on literature, so it was theater history, and Samuel Beckett was one of the artists, novelists that I was repeatedly studying and made a thesis about him. So I was exploring his work and how he also worked from voice into recording and to becoming a radio play eventually. And I found there is some powerful shift between the writing, its recording, and also its outlet in space. So Beckett was a very big influence on this. Of course, he experimented on this many years ago, and then there will be many experiments since then. But for me, I think there is a very interesting process when someone is a writer, and then this has to somehow get out of this silence and get out there, the work. Improvisation as a story, I don't know if you heard earlier, improvisation, and it was made because I wanted to be collaborative work. So I wanted to open up this piece to outside forces. So the piano notes were recorded first. The flute was performed after listening to the piano, and then the script was incorporated in the whole play. I don't know if I answered the question. There's something else.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I think that if anybody had some thoughts or inspirations, you are welcome to contact the author and maybe write her and share that experience.
Yeah.
And
if they have written something, I will be happy to receive it. The notes or whatever annotations happened during that time.
Thank you.
For me, that is the important part. What can this movement, if this movement can lead to other movement? If it's inner, of course, it's very difficult to measure, but somehow I know it's a very difficult moment. It's a struggle, and there's a resistance when we have to take the pen and write, because the mind interferes. But for me, to overcome this, let the hand, like an automatic writing, draw or respond to what we're listening. That's one part that somehow unblocks or releases something. So I can leave my email, so whoever has a note, that annotation that would like to share, I'd be happy to see.
Perfect, thank you. So we hope you will be with us live next time. Thank you again, and we have to move on. Okay, so now we continue with the next presenter, Mia. Welcome. Yes, I put this on. We can also make it full screen.
Yeah.
You want to stand or sit or?
I'll do both, I think.
Okay. So
Do I use this one or this one?
It's both.
Okay.
Like you see.
Yeah, I'll use
it. Doesn't catch me. Yeah. Better this one.
Yeah, it's better.
So maybe if you use this, then sound will be better.
Do you put this already on there? Now, yes. So my name is Mia Heikkinen, and I'm really honored to be here. I'm coming from Finland, from Sibelius Academy, and it says in the program that I'm the professor, but it doesn't quite is the truth. I'm the PhD student in Document Department and doing artistic research about improvisation as a creative tool in operatic performance. And this is my third year and my first conference speech. I have prepared really formal paper, and I'm going to read this from the paper. So, as an opera listener, it is wonderful to hear beautiful opera song. But as a spectator of an opera performance, I would like to experience something else. For me, it is not enough to listen to a performance. I also want to see acting with character. It really bothers me when singers don't really react to each other or seem to be thinking about song technique or other irrelevant things without being present on stage. Then the performance looks fake and the acting goes over or under. Having undergone traditional operatic training, I could have easily, in my career as an opera singer, contented myself with singing my role on stage without much acting. But that didn't really satisfy me. So during and after my studies, I set out to find ways to bring my character to life on stage and to find authenticity in my interpretation. What are the benefits of studying improvisation for an opera singer in a directed opera production? How improvisation can help the singer find the tools to get inside the character. The key words are presence, reactivity, sense of unity, and interaction. My presentation is based on my own experiences and research as an opera singer, improviser, and pedagogue. Here is the problem of an opera singer. In my experience, at least in Finland, singing students are offered a wide variety of acting courses. But the problem is the lack of teaching of the now moment reaction that is essential for the stage. Stage presence is rarely taught at school. Stage friction is either there or it is not. The singer either knows how to act or one does not. After graduation, it remains a mystery how to act practically on stage, how to find the inner world of the role and make it come alive. Also, creating a safe space would also be essential, at least for me. I have never once gone through common rules and boundaries in stage rehearsals. Often, scenes involve intimate or frightening acts. If the performance do not have common rules, the people on stage will either be shy about what they are doing or do it in such a way that the other person feels their integrity has been violated. In the diagram here, you can see how an opera singer learns an opera role. First, translating the text to understand what one is saying and to whom it is said to. The next step is to work on the scene on stage with a co-performer who can also be the audience. If one is not truthfully present in the situation, as Sanford Meisner describes, acting is the ability to live truthfully under imaginary circumstances. There is no contact or interest in the other, and it is impossible to react naturally to the other's words or actions. This results in overacting, or if there is no desire or ability to act, underacting. We are now at a level of acting that is unfortunately common on the opera stage. In my research, I examined my own improvisation group, which is called IMPRO, and the development of different improvisation skills based on our artistic practice. In performances, we test and evaluate skills that combine operatic improvisation, which includes improvising music, text, and acting in live performances. We combine theatrical and musical improvisation, clowning, buffoonia, method acting techniques, and physical theater. My research material is based on interviews, videos, and diary entries. Opera improvisation has previously been studied by Sarah Allain, whose doctoral thesis is called Singing in Action. What about audience participation? My first postgraduate concert in which I explored the use of improvisation was on 13th of May at the Camerata Hall. In our own improvised operas, we walk among the audience before the performance and tell them how they can participate in the performance. My own experience of hosting performances has been really amazing. I feel that fourth wall come down, I get the audience completely on my side, and my tension is completely released, making me feel relaxed and brave. You can imagine this, of course, means that as a performer, I dare to be more open, in contact and present on stage, and to take risks, to try things boldly even at the risk of failure. Similar experiences are referred to by David Dolan and his research colleagues in his study, The Improvisational State of Mind. Audience reactions are like gasoline to the flames. As you will hear in the video I will show you, the audience is present and reacts by laughing several times during the scene. Improvisation and my research focuses on comic opera genre, so it feels immensely satisfying to hear the audience laugh spontaneously, even clapping when we come up with something extremely funny on the fly. At the concert, the audience was heavily involved with us in building the story. We made an opera of 10 scenes in total. For each scene, the audience was given a list to choose the musical style, the characters in the scene, their professions, and the location. In addition, for a few scenes, they were given a prop and/or a phrase to use in the scene. They were also asked to invent with name of the opera. And here you can see some pictures from the improvised opera called the Fur Traders. So the audience gave the name for the opera, and it was the Fur Traders. And it was inspired by meeting of pole dancer Kerttu, who was played by me, here, and dentist Othello, played by my colleague Jenni Lättilä. And we met in a Finnish sauna in style of Mozart. In the next scene, it is. Oh, you can see it. Can't see it. It's the next picture. In the next scene, style of Philip Glass, Kerttu and her widowed mother sang in the cemetery. The story of Othello and his twin brother Petello was followed in the style of a Baroque opera, with the scene being a slaughterhouse. Afterwards, the audience wanted to know more about how they smuggle rare pandas, so they asked for an aeroplane and a Bizet style setting. Next at the airport was Othello, Petello, and Kerttu's mother, who turned out to be a customs officer in style of Wagner. After the interval, the audience wanted Petello and Kerttu to meet in the lingerie department in operetta style. And since there was clearly a rift between the characters, we did a double role at the end. Petello and Othello met their new girlfriends, Kerttu and Kerttu's mother, in a sailboat in Puccini style. Kerttu's mother was accidentally killed and came back to haunt the others as they ran aground in the style of musical. Also, Kerttu was killed in the following contemporary musical scene at the Savonlinna Opera Festival. And then we did an alternative happy ending with the same characters and a philosopher in bel canto style. So it was the audience that concocted this amazing plot. Here is a short video clip of the first scene of the concert, in which the musical style is Mozart. In this scene, a pole dancer woman, played by me, and a dentist man, played by Jenni Lättilä, meet in the sauna, naked of course. The pianist is Mikko Helenius. And I have written in the context of the video what kind of textual and functional improvisational activities are shown and heard. These are invented in the moment from an impulse given by another or developed by myself. So there is no way of knowing what the other will sing or do next, or when it is my turn to sing, or what I will sing. All you can do here is to listen to what the other person says and follow the gestures and actions. At the same time, you have to follow the pianist with your senses open and be ready at any moment to react with the first words or actions that come to mind when your impulse comes. And here is the video. So we are naked. Thank you. I know that there is 3 this kind of opera companies in the world that are doing improvised opera. In Finland is our group, and in Sweden is one group, and in London is one group. If you know some other groups, please tell me. So this has all been learned through opera improvisation rehearsals, and you can see how present and in touch we are with each other. This could well be the model for an ensemble performance of, say, Mozart's Nozze di Figaro or something else. Oh, not again. So, how then could this be taken into education? How could opera improvisation skills be useful for an opera singer in a guided opera production? How can improvisation be used as a tool to find responsiveness, contact, presence, and a sense of unity? How to stay in character on the opera stage? Opera improvisation consists of theater improvisation and music improvisation exercises. The theater improvisation exercises are mainly based on games developed by Keith Johnstone and Viola Spolin, including eye contact, active listening to the other, accepting suggestions and continuing the suggestions with your own first impulse. The principles of story formation are based on Aristoteles' Poetics of Poetry, and there are specific storytelling exercises for this. We will also use and practice the basic techniques of physical theater learned in courses of clowning and bouffon and musical improvisation exercises that we have learned under the guidance of David Dolan, among others. All these exercises give opera improvisers the skills to listen, to be in touch, to receive offers, and to pass them on. Being actively present, truly in the moment with open senses and the skills of interacting and relating is absolute. And these are skills you will not use on opera stage because all the music, the text and the movement have been rehearsed beforehand. The performers know in advance what's going to happen next, and it's easy to go into that sort of thing on autopilot. So, in this diagram, the opera singer starts to learn a new role again by first translating the text and thinking about what one is saying and whom it is said to. Once singers have mastered the skills of operatic improvisation or are doing so in stage rehearsals, the director can still direct the musical strokes and positioning, but the singers acting have the skills to react to each other, to be in contact with each other, to be present, to make a common scene with natural stage presence. And in the event of so-called mistake or something unexpected happening, they are able to create to that too without any problems. What do I say? How do I say it? Why do I say it? And whom do I say it? These all become meaning, and doing, being, and saying become natural, and roles emerge as living and thinking characters. As an aside, singers who are familiar with opera improvisation are in a way at the same school and automatically jump into the role of improviser. I was recently in Stockholm at a meeting of 3 opera improvisation groups. As I mentioned, there is 3 opera improvisation groups. And our collaboration on stage was immediately functional and seamless, incorporating all the parameters of improvisation I mentioned above. When starting improvisation rehearsals, it is also natural to create a safe space and agree that what happens on stage is done by the characters. At the same time, the boundaries of each performer can also be worked through, allowing respect for others. And the ability to do things safely and boldly, and to live in the now moment, where every little difference in tone to agreed direction keeps the performers awake and brings the performance alive and keeps the night-to-night rotation alive, so that the performers are not left repeating exactly the same things in anticipation. And here I put a list of references that I have used during I write this speech. And thank you a lot. So this was the first of my 4 concerts totally, so let's see what's happening next. But I'm going to teach this kind of improvisation skills for the students in Sibelius Academy in next year, so I'm going to research what they will say about this.
Thank you so much, thank you. So, the questions, we have a couple, I think.
Thank you very much. It's really very exciting what you did, and it was a kind of performance for us. It was a kind of conference, a presentation, but at the same time it was a performance, and we will experience that combination, and I love that, because I think that this is something that we can proceed into in these things to combine practice and performance and theory practice. And do you have performance? Do you have this performance as a complete event?
Yes, when I was doing it in Sibelius Academy, they video recorded it. It is in YouTube, but under a secure link. But I will do it in public. I think it's no problem to do it. So the complete show will be there in YouTube. Oh, this. This was the doctoral concert play, but we have done a lot of this kind of plays also. Usually we use a musical theater. In Finland there is musical theater called Kapsäkki, and they have restaurant where we are doing these kind of shows. So it's nice when people can eat and drink at the same time that they are listening to the opera. So.
Quite interesting, so we can invite you this summer. We have in the beach, we have a lot of people there. You can do this. I love this, Paul. Do you agree, Ramunė? We have to do also business. Sorry. So, yes, but my idea is, okay, yes, I understand that idea of restaurant and things like that. We can do a small, short event for the people, for enjoying. But it will be quite interesting to have a performance there. So we'll be in contact to have this in Marathon, because always I was thinking about how to connect opera with the acting. And because sometimes, sorry to say, it was so boring to see. Yeah. And usually I close my eyes in order to listen and experience the music or the voices than to see. Sometimes there are disaster things happens, especially in movement, sorry to say, in opera. We are a small company here. I don't know if there are other people, sorry to say that. But sometimes is completely, so I'm relaxed and I'm enjoying the listening in the opera. But now it's something very, very interesting. And just a bit of information that Fassbinder did that in his films. When an actor was unable to scream, so Fassbinder asked an actor to bite, and then so, and they have, I mean, the camera on the face, but someone bitten you. So Fassbinder used that cruel things in order to bring out the emotion and the movement that they wanted to have as a real event. But sometimes people, they say, I can't cry. So Fassbinder said, okay, so let's cry now, and let's have the scene, because we have no time for this. So they happened a lot in acting. So it is also something that the people, they don't know what happened when we have, I mean, we know, we can watch the face, but we don't know what happened. Other people working around the actors, so there are technical things around him, so they are acting with their faces, but there is a mess around them. It is a very, so it's very, very nice.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mia. I was really surprised actually where it went. It went into a very interesting direction, into comedy and improvising, using the audience as a stimulus. And I suppose I wondered, I thought you might talk more about how you deal with the transition from someone being a character in a real situation on stage to then singing in this heightened way. And I just wonder whether you have any thoughts about that aspect, because the things you're using, like viola spolin, are really used more for realistic acting, naturalistic acting. And I just wonder, yeah, it's great to see them really relaxing and being active and listening and all those things which kind of underpin. But then you've still got this problem of the form. And how does this, when you actually deal with a more realistic form rather than kind of this comic pastiche, if you like, how these techniques help actors sing, or singers act? That's the way of putting it. How do you help singers really act in a more realist fashion? Or perhaps that's not your interest at all. But that's why I was surprised. I thought you were going to talk about that.
So you are asking, how do I feel like all the techniques help me as a singer? Yeah, if I understood right, I think that these techniques that we are using, these are the exercises how we are doing the opera improvisation. And when we are doing opera improvisation, we have to have these all listening and participating in contact. And these are the things that we are rehearsing in opera improvisation situation that we are going to put to repertoire opera. Is it? Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Yeah. And that we are now going to. This was the first concert of mine where we did the whole improvised opera, and the next concert of mine will be more like I'm going to do Mozart Zauberflöte in not the whole thing, but I'm going to research the women who are there, and I'm going to sing the arias. But the characters are not the same as in Zauberflöte, but I'm going to put them in the other situation, and I'm going to focus how can I use these parameters, these improvisation parameters when I'm playing a written opera role that is not improvised. So I'm improvising the stage thing, but the text and music is, yeah, of course, yeah.
In Herodium, I experienced these two kinds of, let's say, different kind of opera singers. So they were the Greeks, like, and so there was an American woman, Nabucco. Yeah. Nabucco, I can't remember now the name of the woman. I will try to find one. And she was active on stage. She was playing, see the physicality of her body. And it was, as far as I know, there are two different schools now in opera. The people, they have the ability to use their physicality, and they are great actors, and they have mastery on their voice, and they are amazing. So I experienced that. I mean, if you watch some of the American Metropolitan Opera, and the Americans love the idea of bringing, I don't know who was the first, did that, maybe some from Europe, France, I don't know, maybe But I experienced that the difference between the Greeks, great singers, great classical singers, it was amazing, but this woman was quite interesting to see the physicality on her, and it was, of course, as you understand, it's an open-air theater, and she had to run on the space, and of course the movement was not naturalistic in the way, but he was symbolic, expressive, and she was marvelous. So I can see now the way of creating and seeing the training of the singers in this way. Because I worked once in a national opera in Greece, so some Mahler's song, and a director created Mahler and his wife and some kind of performance. So there was a woman that opera singer, oh, Mahler sings, and so I said to him, could you please move? I said, no, I don't. What are you talking about? And I said, you have to move a little bit, sorry. I was young at that moment, and I was studying. Later, she invited me in her space, personal space, wardress, and said to me, darling, you are right, I'm unable to move. So she understood that your amazing voice, but all these things. So yes, as far as I understand, this is the technique. Yeah. How to move that waltz, darling. Yes, because it's very difficult to move them. Yeah. Very, very difficult. They refuse because they are concentrated on their voices, and they are afraid of losing something. I don't know.
That is why as you said, I don't like to go to see opera performances, because it's awful to see. I can listen to them, but it's awful to see when they are just standing and singing. And last time I was seeing Don Giovanni in Finnish National Opera, and they were really lovely singers, but they overacted or underacted. Yeah.
Maria Callas brought this acting, because she was understand the idea of being. Of course, it started from they wanted to create a star. So in order to create a star, you have to have a real star. So this is the first step: how to consume the space, how to be the master of the space, and then you can sing and you can do whatever you like. So Maria Callas introduced that. So Maria Callas had acting classes, and he was. Sorry to speak about
No, it's okay. Yeah, but I mean, like, if you go back in the history, it was again acting and singing all together. It's just a matter of technique. You can sing and move. Early opera was much more acting and moving rather than this 19th century thing.
Thank you so much. It was so much information and joy to see. So. What I wanted to ask, so what is your future thoughts about projects? And do you think about like even not absurd, but very different settings, like when we were talking of instruments or spaces, or even like to show the same thing in very different spaces, very different, and to see how it's on stage again, on the same stage. And another thing, talking about Maria Callas now, what I studied in CVT, in Scientific Voice Institute, that she was actually the only one who uses like metallic hey till higher notes, while nearly all opera singers switch the mode from sol mode, from sol middle. So yeah, maybe it's about acting also related, I don't know, but they mentioned Maria Callas. Yeah, but thank you very much. It was.
Zeffirelli was one of the directors that he was also directed opera and directed theater and directed also on screen. So he knew. And they were close friends with Maria Callas. And also at that time, don't forget that Maria Callas was connected with Katina Paxinou, who was one of the best actresses in the world, Katina Paxinou. He was working with Elias Kazan. And Katina Paxinou, she was a singer, opera singer, before turning to acting after 40s, 45. Katina Paxinou played Electra, everything in Ancient Greek tragedy with Alexis Minotis. And she was a great star at that moment. She was playing at Hollywood, and she's considered one of the biggest actresses in the world. So they were connected. So Maria Callas had all the information that she needed in order to, because Maria Callas did a transformation at her body. So from another body, she became a diva. And so she transformed in a way. And that kind of transformation is very important. And so I have something to say about the transformation of the body. You remember, Paul, last summer, I was invited, a guy from Kento, a Japanese guy. So he entered the room, and I was welcome him before starting. So I saw a man like at my size. So a guy said, and I said, what kind of Kento people is and suddenly he started all the procedure wearing all these robes, and suddenly he transformed into something bigger, a warrior. And it's completely the transformation of the body there. And then she take off the clothes of Kento, and he was the normal guy saying, hello, thank you very much. So, and this is the transformation that we are talking about. And this was, so it's, yes, yes. So, but returning again to your work. So I saw that it's you, one of the actors, and the other. So I saw physicality. So do you have any extra, dance classes or acrobatics or something else?
Yes, I have been dancing when I was young, ballet, and also done some acrobatics. And I think I'm the more physical of. In our group, there is 2 singers, and I'm more the physical type, and doing a lot of things with my body. And the other one is Jenny is really well in textual things. She really invents really nice rhymes, and she's really good in text. So we have different things.
We are speaking about a versatile actor, a versatile performer, let's say. I love it.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah. There was some question that I didn't answer.
Well, anyway, we will have the recordings, and people can see our discussions and then continue in our other sessions. I think it would be nice if we continue this discussion with coffee as a networking session. Yes, because we also need to get to another events as well. So sorry to cut this, but we have 2 more days here, and thank you very much. Beautiful. And thank you for the first day. See you tomorrow. And see you tomorrow. And yeah, we have cake and cookies probably, and tea and coffee. So. Yeah, there is a concert as well in the room, in the sphere, in the 3rd floor up there. It's at 7, yes. Yeah, here in the building, so you can also go have dinner somewhere quickly around. Yeah. Okay, until tomorrow.